Hello, good morning. Happy Saturday. I'm Meghan Maes, and this is Being Civil in Minnesota. This is a place where I come every Saturday at 10 to talk about family issues and issues with the courts that are going on here in the state of Minnesota. I am licensed to practice law, both here in the state and federally. I'm also a qualified neutral, meaning I can do mediations. That does not make me your lawyer. That does not mean you should come here and ask for legal advice. This is a great place for legal resources and free information. If you know anyone that has questions about the family court process or is going through something and they don't quite understand everything, please send them to the group Being Civil in Minnesota. They can ask questions anonymously, and I answer them here every week. So this week I'm going to talk a little bit about moving. There are lots of good reasons that people want to move: jobs, family, new romantic partners, lots of good reasons. And so the question I get a lot is, well, can I move? We're separated now. I'd like to move. And that is going to depend on whether or not you're asking if you can move within the state of Minnesota or outside of the state of Minnesota. There are different rules when it comes to moving within the state and outside of the state. If you're moving in state, I'm from southern Minnesota, right? So if I was moving from one side of the river to the other, even if it's a different county, say Nicollet County and Blue Earth County, well, that's not a large geographic distance. Whatever the parenting time schedule or contact, whatever that was like in the past, is likely to be able to be maintained given the short distance between current residents and potential residents. Things to consider if you are moving within the state are going to be things like transportation, right? If the other parent moves 4 hours away, are you going to drive halfway every time? If you move 4 hours away, are you going to meet in the middle? Is one parent going to do all the transportation? Courts have had different opinions, I guess, when it comes to, whether a party moving away should have more responsibility for transportation than the other. I've seen it go all kinds of ways. Then the other consideration is, well, what was the schedule, right? If you're moving somewhere super close by and you have a Tuesday evening dinner time kind of visit, that's likely going to be able to continue to happen if you live within a close distance. The farther you move away, the harder it is to continue doing a short visit if the transportation time is like 4 hours, for example. So there may need to be changes to the schedule to account for the fact that those visits may not be able to happen anymore, and that's something that the parties can work out together. If they have an agreement, they can put that together. If they don't have an agreement, they can try and work out something with a mediator and avoid court. The other consideration is, if you are seeking to move out of state, there is going to be a little bit of a different analysis. The considerations are going to be pretty similar, but if you are the parent that the child lives with and the other parent has parenting time through a court order, then you're either going to need that other parent's permission to move out of state or the judge's permission. Not everybody loves to ask permission. Some people prefer to ask for forgiveness. In this case, if you do have a court-ordered schedule for custody and parenting time and you choose to move out of state in violation of that, there are some really negative consequences that can happen. You could have custody changed. If a child is removed out of a state without much information, there's going to be kind of a knee-jerk reaction probably from the court to want to have that child immediately brought back and explain what is going on here. So you can avoid that by talking to the other parent in advance and either getting their approval, and if you can't get their approval, then you go and you ask a court. And what is the court going to look at, and whose burden is it? If you're the one moving out of state, you have the burden to show. And the things that a court will look at is, what was the relationship like with the other parent prior to you wanting to move? How will this impact the kid? does the child have any preferences, and are they reasonable? Meaning, if your child is 6 and you say you're moving to Hawaii because they want to be a marine biologist, that is great, and I love that you want to support that. I just don't know if that's going to be a reliable preference because of the age of the child. How are you going to maintain a relationship with the other parent? There's so much more formats and methods and ways that you can interact with people socially from long distances. So that has become less of a burden. Money. How is the child going to get back and forth? Are we talking Minnesota, Texas? Are you going to drive and meet in the middle? Is this child going to be flying? Are they old enough to fly? So many kinds of logistical things that come up with an out-of-state or a multi-state kind of shared residence schedule. The court will look at, is the parent wanting to move? Have they historically promoted a good relationship, or have they tried to interfere with the other parent's parenting time? If there's a history of interference, regardless of the intentions, it's very likely that there's going to be some questions as to why this is not just another, attempt to interfere with that. They'll look at, is this going to enhance the quality of life for the parent or the care provider and the child? And they'll look at safety. And so safety is something very important in the consideration for a move out of state provision, that in the state of Minnesota, if the parent or provider wanting to move out of state is a victim of domestic abuse by the other parent, then the other parent has the burden to say why they should have to stay, right? Because it seems very unfair for a victim to have to stay in a close proximity with their abuser simply because the abuser wants to have that access to them. And so this kind of takes into account that sort of power imbalance, and it says give us good reasons, not just your normal I want access and power and control. So best practices is, if you can, in advance, be open with the other parent. It's less likely that a court is going to order a child to be returned immediately if there's some kind of correspondence or writing, either notifying the other parent or getting them to agree. And then you'll want to gather your evidence, right? What's the difference in schools? Are there different activities? Do you have family that is in closer proximity to the location you want to move? And if that's the case, you can bring that information, because if the other parent is not going to agree, then you will need a court's permission. Now, I will say, I'm sure there are a few out there that are thinking, well, there is no custody and parenting time, so I can move whenever I want, not a big deal. And that's technically true. One thing to keep in mind, that there is something called the UCCJEA, and without getting too much into it, it basically says that in Minnesota, a court is going to want to decide initial child custody determinations if the child and the parents have lived here for 6 months or more. So if you move somewhere else for the next 6 months, there are ways that you can transfer jurisdiction to another state, but Minnesota will likely retain that jurisdiction for 6 months. So you want to make sure that you're taking into consideration, are you going to have to come back for a long, a custody battle? How is that going to be going back and forth? Or maybe the other parent is never going to respond and you are free to go move to wherever it is that you want to move. So every family is different and the facts matter, which is why this is not legal advice and legal information. If you have somebody that has additional questions on this, pop them in the comments, or post the questions on Being Civil in Minnesota. You can post them anonymously if you want to keep your privacy, and I will try to answer them on Saturdays at 10. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves. Have Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next week.